To be here and to comment on these two projects that both examine neighborhood change and transition in very different local contexts. MacArthur Park in Los Angeles and the Southeast National communities of Flat Rock and Antioch. I should add that I'm particularly excited to be here and talk about two cities that I know and love pretty intimately. I went to UCLA for graduate school, and then I moved to Nashville from LA to do my dissertation in 2008, and when I got there, actually, I heard stories about a geographer who had been poking around the city, studying immigration, and I thought, I came too late to the party. Now I'm just glad to be a member. Okay, so Gerardo's paper explores neighborhood revitalization in MacArthur Park and explains how and why a transit-oriented development project in the neighborhood actually improved or revitalized the neighborhood, rather than leading to gentrification as these projects often do. So he identified two factors which really played an important role in establishing this transit project and having them take the neighborhood into account. So the first was the power of Latino political advocacy and how Latino political leaders helped ensure that this particular development project didn't displace neighborhood residents. And in the paper that he sent, part of it was about the ways that community organizations that were already part of the neighborhood had relationships with these politicians, so we're able to advocate for the neighborhood directly. And the politicians in turn could really pressure local development agencies to take the community into account. And he also suggested that the neighborhood's immigrant gateway status and its vibrant community life were a form of cultural capital. And these things also contributed to neighborhood revitalization. So he described, for example, how different cultures and ethnicities really form the foundation of the neighborhood's social and economic life. Transforming MacArthur Park into an area with lots of local vendors, local businesses, and a really lively park full of playgrounds and soccer meadows. Meadows, not fields. And then ultimately, part of this project is about arguing that local immigrant neighborhoods should be seen as dynamic communities that can be built upon and sustained. The revitalization doesn't depend on pushing them out, but really bringing them in. So whereas Gerardo's story really suggests that Mexican and Central Americans revitalized a MacArthur Park neighborhood that was once sort of known as the center of police corruption and gang violence, as Jamie's project shows, these conclusions aren't always so clear-cut. Or, put another way, there's not always one narrative regarding how Latino immigrants change a community. So Jamie's description of neighborhood change in Southeast Nashville demonstrates how in Southeast Nashville, long-term residents and new Latino arrivals had very different ideas and understandings about what the neighborhood is and was and what the neighborhood meant. That is, that long-term residents and Latino immigrants understood and enacted neighborhood in different ways, and that these different understandings were central to understanding Nashville's politics of demographic and social change. So long-term residents couldn't describe the way their neighborhood was changing, they just know that they felt really uncomfortable in places where they used to feel comfortable. And Latino residents couldn't describe the neighborhood, and when they did, they sort of talked broadly about social networks, but didn't really have any tie to local geography. Jamie's work also suggested that the mobilization of these local histories hinder Latino immigrants' abilities to really form part of a neighborhood or part of a community life. Because there's an interpretive framework that's part of the community that they really can't reference, see, or have access to. So as her work points out, new immigrant destinations lack a clear way to place immigration in a local historical context. So whereas Latino immigration in LA is very much a part of the fabric of the city, a history that the city can reference, in Nashville, residents and local leaders have no narrative to draw upon to sort of bring immigrants into local and political life. Consequently, when local community organizations in Nashville actually respond to the needs of immigrant residents, even responding to them can become contested and controversial in ways that it would never be in Los Angeles. And as an aside, when I moved to Nashville and I saw the sort of anti-immigrant policies that were happening, I would joke to my friends that what Nashville really needed was Chicanos. so that, they couldn't do these things to them. So as Gerardo described it, however, Latinos seemed to enter a MacArthur Park that had already been sort of abandoned by long-term residents. And so the story that he tells is really about the ways that immigrants made the neighborhood better. And so I really have only one question as we try to think about neighborhood revitalization and sort of link these projects together, is when we're talking about revitalization, it's revitalization to whom? And so the way that Gerardo narrates changes in MacArthur Park, it's sort of seen as an improvement in the neighborhood. But in Southeast Nashville, these same changes that he described might not be seen so favorably. So my question really to both of them is it really revitalization? Well, for Jamie, to what extent are immigrants revitalizing the neighborhood, particularly the Murfreesboro and Nolensville corridor? And if it's not understood as that, might it ever be? And the question for Gerardo is, was this change that you described ever contested? Because as it's presented, it seems like everybody just thought it was a good idea. And then, I'll stand up here and I can sort of take the questions as you have them.